We got a tiny one. Everybody, welcome back to Maker's Playground. Today we're talking all about our $100 sawmill. Hashtag saw not included. So back in September of 2018, I posted what I called the $50 sawmill. Made out of 2x4s. It was a really simple project, and this is kind of the culmination of that. I wanted to make a few improvements and try a couple of different things. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to cut some more logs up and show you how well this works, and explain a little more about the sawmill. So what I want to do is tell you about the changes that I made to the sawmill. Some of them I'm really glad I made, some of them not so much. First of all, the track itself. I made some changes to this. One of them was good, the other, I wish I wouldn't have made that change. So right here you'll see that we have a little 45 coming down. So I cut an angle here, so I brought this down, and the reason I did that is I want to run my cable for turning the hand cranky thing. That's a technical term. As before, I just came straight across like this. The other thing we did is added steel to this instead of using the little wood add-ons right here. I'm not that excited about that change. You know, this was an extra expense. Quite frankly, it's not really adding anything to the build. So if I had to do this again, I would just use a wood piece right here. Now what this does is it allows me to come under here and capture the carriage so it won't rock off, and it'll help kind of hold it steady. The other thing I really liked is this cable track that we have, and we're using just a boat winch. You know, it's the thing you put on the front of a boat that you load and unload boats off of a trailer with. Now to make the cable management really simple, we literally just have a stop block here, cable screwed here, and it runs right across the center, all the way down to the carriage. And on the bottom of the carriage, I have a pulley mounted right underneath here. Now, I know you're thinking it's gonna snap, it's gonna come off of there, but it doesn't. It stays pretty taut, so you don't have to worry about it jumping out. That comes up to our boat winch. Now the boat winch is a geared winch, so it has a small gear here, large gear here, which makes cutting through this really super easy. One of the things you have to be careful with when you're doing this is that you can literally pull this saw so hard that it'll jam up, stop, or break your system. So you want to be very aware of the amount of pressure and torque that's being put on the blade as you're cutting through. You don't want to go too fast. So I changed the carriage so it was riding on steel, and I put some bearings inside of here, thinking that, you know what, well, we're going to be using this a lot. Obviously with the prices of lumber now, we're going to be using this a lot. I wish I wouldn't have done it. Now before, in the old plan set that we have available, it rides wood to wood, and I just came out every once a week or so and just waxed, you know, using furniture paste wax, and that kept it really nice and even. The other thing I don't like about this is it seems like the sawdust builds up a lot more than the other one did. With the wood sitting on the wood, it kind of plowed the sawdust out of the way. It never became an issue. The one thing I do like about the change I made is rather than having to slide this whole thing on from the end, I have these capture mechanisms, so I can just take these capture mechanisms out and lift the whole carriage right off of the saw. So I like that change, but honestly I think I'll probably go back to just a flat carriage riding right on top of the track itself. It doesn't make it any easier. It's an added complication for building, so just like I had in the old plan set, that's the way I'm going to go back to. One of the other changes I made from the plans was I made this handle slightly smaller. Before, I kind of had it going all the way across, so it was this big thing. But in order to get my winch right in the middle of the carriage, I made this smaller, and that was probably a pretty good move. I'm really glad that I did that with this. And a big change that we made that I think is probably one of the best things is actually adding a trigger pull mechanism. Before, I just had tape wrapped around the handle, and I literally had some paracord that would just go underneath it, and I would pull the paracord when I wanted the trigger of the saw to pull down. So this was a really fun change. I'm not 100% satisfied with this design. What I did have is a bolt under here that secures it to the handle, but even with that, it was still vibrating off, so I have this temporary clamp on it. So that design is going to change a little bit, but I do like having the bike handle there, and when I pull that, the saw goes. It's a very comfortable way to run the saw. Next up, again, it's kind of a reoccurring theme here. I changed the size of the saw tower. I made it a little bit smaller. Now I thought, you know, making it a little bit smaller, I could make this a little bit shorter, get a little bit more cutting capacity, but honestly, making the smaller probably wasn't the smartest decision. I liked having it before. I kind of had this big saw tower here, so I could actually set my saw up on top of it and mount a little vise for sharpening the teeth, doing any maintenance I needed on the saw. And I made this also a little bit taller than the last one as well, which really isn't needed. I mean, we're running a 26-inch bar on this. We'll probably upgrade to a 30-inch bar, but this is just over a 70cc saw, so I'm never gonna get bigger than a 30-inch bar, which brings me to saws. You can really do this with pretty much any saw, as long as you keep a couple things in mind. Your feeds and speeds, the type of blade that you're using. So if you're running a really small saw, you're not gonna get the big logs. You're gonna be cutting smaller logs. But switching from a standard chain to what's called a ripping chain, and I'll put a link in the description box if you wanna learn more about those, can make a big difference in the performance of cutting through the long side of the grain rather than cross-cutting. Having that ripping chain on the saw makes all the difference in the world. But it's a true rule of thumb when you start talking about saws. The bigger the saw, the more cc's the saw, the bigger the log you're going to be able to cut comfortably. So as you can see, I have a drill on top of the tower. The drill basically just lets me move the saw up and down easily. You could definitely put a hand crank on there. Obviously, I don't want to put a hand crank on there. It's a lot nicer just to pull the trigger and the saw moves to its location. And that really does make it just one more thing that makes it really nice and easy. Now, I have had people say, why not put a drill here? And that's because you need to feel the cut. It's like anything, you need to be able to feel what's going on with the saw, whether you need to slow the cut down, speed the cut up. It really depends, again, back to the size of saw that you're cutting and the chain you're using. You're gonna have different pressures, and you wanna be able to feel what's going on, whether you need to slow down or whether you can speed up, and that kind of thing. By putting a drill on here could really just be a bad situation. So having that crank on there, you can kind of feel all the things that are coming through the handle and the crank, knowing whether to slow down or to speed up your cut. So one of the big questions I've gotten over the last couple of years is how I mounted the saw. Now that's not included in the plan set, so pay attention. You'll see these two holes drilled in the bar. Drilling a hole through chainsaw bars can be a little bit tricky, but the trick is to use a very high quality blade or a very high quality drill bit and use oil and then run slow, 400, 450 RPM on your drill press, and you're gonna have no trouble. The trick is the high quality drill bit. Don't go down to Home Depot and buy one of the DeWalt's thinking that it's gonna work great. It won't. Find a nice quality drill bit to drill the holes. So I drilled two 5/16" holes, and then I drilled the corresponding holes through this piece of wood here. This is two pieces of Baltic birch. These are 5/16 bolts that come through. Now I have it screwed in through the back right here. I have it screwed in through the bottom right here, and I have it also the second support screwed into the back right here. So I have a little over 1.5 inches of meat kind of hanging on to this right here. And some people may feel a little weird about using wood. I'm telling you, it works just fine. Plywood here, plywood there, and a nice piece of wood right there, and it's going to work great. So it's really quite easy thing to do if you take your time and do it right. And the last thing I did for mounting the saw is I drilled a small hole in the back here because there's a little bit of movement. That just kind of gives it one more little point of being secured, and that's it. That's how I mount the saw on the sawmill. So one fun little feature is just these indicator marks right here. So I have a knob right here I can loosen up and adjust this to whatever I want to adjust it to as far as height goes. So when I get my saw to where I want to make that first cut, I can then move this indicator guide up to one of my tick marks, tighten it down. So when I could bring the saw back down, I just go to the next tick mark, and that's going to give me 1.5 inch cut. 1.5 inches plus the blade width is added to those tick marks. So I'm going to get 1.5 inch slab when I use those tick marks for cutting. It just makes it really easy. You don't have to get your tape measure out, and it's just a really good way of keeping your wood consistent. So for those of you that are interested, we have plans available for what we call the $50 sawmill. Obviously, lumber prices are a little higher now, so it's going to cost a few bucks more to build it. There's not enough significant differences between this and that one that add value to it to make changes to the plans. So if you buy the plans, you can obviously see the changes that we made here, and if you want to make those changes, you can. The one thing I will say over and over again is don't get fancy pants with the carriage and the guide. Wood on wood is fine. Just make sure that you wax it once a week or when you're using it. And if you're storing it in a garage or indoors, one of the nice things about this particular thing is you can unscrew the handle, you can unscrew the tower, so it just breaks down to this really compact, simple to store sawmill, and you can throw it in the back of your truck and take it wherever you want. Now, because we're going to be using this a lot, I built a permanent station for it. But if you see my old video, and I'll link that below so you can go watch that, the track right here would just screw to a couple pieces of 2x4 with a little T on them. You could throw it in the back of your truck and take it out in the woods, basically take it anywhere you need to cut logs. So it's very, very portable. It just so happens that we're going to be using it a lot right here, so I built a nice flat permanent station for it. The trick to making sure that when you're sawmilling you're getting good straight boards is make sure your base is flat. So if you check out the old video, see how we did it, make sure that those things are level or flat. Not necessarily level, but just coplanar to the saw blade. So if you've watched other sawmill videos online, you can they're always sped up, or they just like do little cuts through the material. Sawing through a log takes some time. Now granted, this is only 16, 17 inches, but going through this is going to take a little bit of time. So I thought what might be fun is to show you an actual cut without speeding it up, without an editing, from start to finish, and see what that looks like. So we're going to do that now. I'm guessing this is going to take about 1:20, maybe 1:30 to cut through. So if you want to just kind of fast forward through that, you can. Otherwise, let's cut some woods. Having way too much fun with this sawmill here at the playground. One of the things I'm doing right now to hold the log is I'm just putting in these blocks and attaching them with screws for now. Obviously there's much better methods, and I have some really cool ideas, but we'll save that for an upcoming video. Right now we just want to cut wood. Everybody, thank you so much for watching today. Really appreciate it. We're all here at the playground having a blast with this. It's kind of fun just to cut logs. You know, we've got quite a few dead ones laying around, and we're already starting to source more, so this thing's going to get a workout. Now, in upcoming videos, we're going to accessorize this for log holding. We're going to do some stuff on moving logs around easier with, you know, simple builds. So all that's coming, so you're not going to want to forget to subscribe and make sure that you hit that bell notification so you get notified when our videos come out. Also, if you're interested in building this, we do have the old set of plans available. I'll put a link in the description box below. With those plans and what we've shown you today, you guys can customize your own sawmill the way you want it and be sawing logs as well. So with that said, I'm gonna get back to it. This is all kinds of fun. Thanks for watching. Beautiful. That's a good shot.